A warm welcome to everybody. I'm Stephen Timms, Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Faith and Society. What we're doing in this meeting, I'm very pleased to say, is to hear about and discuss some very interesting ideas from Leeds Becket University for a national pandemic commemoration. A day has been set aside for this purpose, and we're going to be hearing some interesting ideas about things that might be done on that day. So a very warm welcome to the Reverend Ruth Dowson, to Dr. Ian Lamond, and to Bernadette Albert. Thank you all senior lecturers at the university. Thanks for being with us. You're all at the events management, the UK Centre for Events Management, I think, aren't you? Which is a centre within Leeds Becket University. And also welcome to Olivia and to Beatrice, whose ideas we're going to be hearing from shortly. Just let me say a very quick word about the All-Party Group on Faith and Society. We've been going since 2012. FaithAction, and Daniel Singleton is on the line, has provided the secretariat for the group ever since it began. And, you know, the background really is that people often think or say that religion is on the way out. Actually, what we see, I see in my constituency and other members of the group see in their constituencies around the country, is quite the reverse, that we're seeing more and more being undertaken by faith-based groups and faith groups themselves directly as well. We've particularly seen that in a pretty spectacular way during the pandemic. So I think it's very appropriate for this group to be looking at how we might have a commemoration in the future for the events of the pandemic as well. So I think first of all, the Reverend Ruth Dowson is going to give us a little bit of background to what we're doing this afternoon. Thank you, Ruth, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to hear these ideas.
Thank you. It's an honour for all of us. So we're a team, as you said, from Leeds Becket University, the UK Centre for Events Management, students and staff. And there you'll find more detail. We produced a briefing paper that I think Jenny has sent out. And so we've produced that. Ian's just sharing the screen for you, so you can see that's who we are. And if you want any more information, we're just going to go through a couple of slides here where different members of staff are going to talk about things, and then Beatrice and Olivia will present their ideas. Okay, Ian.
So we're part of the UK Centre for Event Management, which is the longest existing event management school within higher education within England. And as a team, we cover quite a broad gamut of what is covered by events. Within the panel today, we have 3 experienced events management academic teachers who are also highly experienced in a range of events as practitioners as well. Ruth and I and Bernie have also published quite extensively around events that mark the end of life, and we're bringing to bear some of that experience with us. I think Ruth has already pointed out how the project itself has emerged through one of the second year level 5 modules within the UK Centre's Events Management degree programme, and they'll be sharing their ideas with you today. Bernie.
That's me.
Oh, it's you again. Sorry.
This is me. No, it's okay. So the other thing we wanted to share with you was that we have personal experience of COVID and of loss and bereavement in the pandemic, and this is actually my dad's cremation service with a socially distanced outdoor celebration because nobody was allowed. So we understand kind of where all this is coming from. And over to Bernie.
Okay, so some of the considerations that we asked the students to look into were diversity in planning the event. We recognise and acknowledge that we need to be very inclusive, including language, traditions, beliefs, cultures, deep cultures, in how we develop this event and how we deliver this event. Also, the idea that we cater for different faiths and no faiths, people with no faith background at all, that we think about spiritual aspects as well as the religious, which is really important. Talking about the geographic location, so will we focus on one main event and community events throughout the country, so that everybody gets an opportunity to actually commemorate, celebrate, remember. And the timing, is it one day or the launch of an ongoing period? So this was something that needed to be considered. So did we think, okay, when? Is it over now? Which I think we're now understanding that it may be an ongoing situation that we have to deal with, or do we have it sooner and allow that commemoration event to occur over and over again? We also said to the students to think about the purpose of the event in terms of different stakeholder perspectives. So think about bereaved people, faith adherents and faith leaders, talking about charities, local authorities, government. We also thought about enabling many people to engage, whether or not they consider themselves religious. This is a very unique type of commemoration or remembrance event where we need to be very inclusive and think of the diversity, not only of the people who will engage in it, but of their experiences as well. We also think about providing a meaningful ritual or activity for people to come together, both regionally, locally, to acknowledge their loss publicly and the legacy of the illness, because even though some people were not affected directly by the illness, it has a long-term impact either on their health or the way that we live our lives moving forward. And also this idea that we have an opportunity to lament. There is a Thanksgiving as well, and restoration, and this idea of change and commemoration, remembrance, and a ritualization to allow people to cope and manage and move forward.
Now we're going to move on to Olivia.
So we're moving to Olivia first.
It's Beatrix first, they're her slides.
Okay.
Would you like me to go first? Is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
No, it's okay. Hi, I'm Beatrice. I'm final year student of events management at Leeds Becket University. And last year we had the opportunity to design our assessment around the COVID-19 commemoration event. When designing the event and the ideas, I kept always going back to the main aim outlined, and that was recognizing the loss the UK as a whole has experienced and is still experiencing, coming together to express the grief, the mourn, and support each other on this grieving journey. So we explored Fallacy's model of rituals and the transcendence concept of events as contemporary solutions responding to a human need for a sense of a bigger something in life. Therefore, my event had the main purpose of enabling them with the beginning of the journey to accept, talk, and mourn what we had lost, to build back together, but always remembering and celebrating the lives of those we have lost. So my event and concept and the main activities were around a one-day-long event with activities and religious and non-religious rituals encouraged throughout the whole UK, with an interactive initiative that involved the previous 2 days, so leading up to the main event. So as you can see, the day of forgiveness, day of gratefulness, and day of commemoration. The day of forgiveness, so during this day, the audience are encouraged to embrace the feeling and start a forgiving journey. Also, local communities will be encouraged to direct the different religious and social centers to hold a mass, meetings or reunions that are about forgiving in the case there are some members of the audience that do not feel comfortable just talking to someone on the phone. The wellbeing teams and assigned NHS professionals that would volunteer would be available to support anyone struggling in the process and grieving during the day. Teams come with female and male professionals, and the audience can book a phone call appointment, and they will have the option to remain anonymous. And then we would move on to Day of Gratefulness. So this day revolves around thanking everyone that has helped them through this hard time. So as well, in honor of every key worker that has played a role into helping, I propose a clapping minute and the local communities would be encouraged to direct their audience to come together at the local parks and clap at the same time, sharing their gratefulness as a community. The main concept was cohesion, coming together, the whole UK as a community. And then arriving to the day of commemoration. So for the purpose of the assessment, I decided to hold it in London, but I will talk in my next slide after this, how we could put it throughout the whole UK. So in the assessment, I talked about the day of commemoration. Thanks to the previous 2 days, the audience arrived with a healing journey process and ready to commemorate the departed loved ones with a different mindset. During this day, there's stalls all around the venue with professions from various backgrounds and religions to support the different types of guests with talks and activities to get involved. Throughout the event, the family members of the victims that have accepted and are able to attend are invited to put their puzzle piece in a sculpture. That's the sculpture you can see on the screen. To the end of the event, they're asked if they feel comfortable as well. They can hold each other's hand in a circle. Of course, it's an ongoing thing, it's still COVID. So for the purpose, we would maybe ask just to put your hands out as a sign of respect for the others departed loved ones. And the main sculpture is built as a puzzle. Every piece represents a life lost due to COVID-19, commemorating their life. Also, it is the face of the charity See United, which would be funded. It was an idea that would be funded from the profits of this event and the marketing campaign. The charity is for the aid of the victims and family, friends, and community affected by COVID-19. So the beautiful thing behind the sculpture is that it will hold a different meaning to every single guest. So the representation of, for example, not being able to touch anyone that was not in your own household or support bubble during COVID-19 and the lockdowns. For the audience, for example, to form their own idea behind the meaning as well. So some guests might see it as a departed loved ones reaching from heaven, like with religious beliefs. And other guests might just see it as a departed loved ones also reaching from the ones that were lost, but not being able to touch them anymore. So like they value the little things like holding hands. Could I just have the next slide, please, Ian? Thank you. So in class, we were challenged to look at this event and designing the event from a broader perspective, as we're very fortunate to come with more than 270 different cultures and nationalities in the UK and the 300 languages or more than we have. So we had to look at everything. So looking at it from the idea of interpersonal rituals and its meanings, as commemorating the loss means something very different to every nation, culture, religion, and individual as well. So we worked in a culture risk assessment. So it's a risk assessment as you assess the risk that can emerge from the event, but assessing from others' perspectives. This was thanks to Vernie and Ruth and Ian. And these perspectives like culture, religion, accessibility, gender, race, but also looking at with the other aspects and factors like how they're interlinked with the food, the weather, the location, the time of the event, and so much more. So we started looking into so much more to put in a random day because we had to assess the audience that is coming and researching to making sure that we're just not adapting the event, but we would understand why we were adapting this event. So we were things like accommodating a room for praying times or looking at the whole dietary requirements of every religion and culture and medical issues. So it was thinking about going that extra mile to make sure your audience and all of them and the culture respected. And this slide is about my event objectives. So thanks to the culture risk assessment, I was able to develop my event objectives. So the first one was about the event must show significant knowledge on a diverse range of cultures and traditions around commemoration events to respect and then implement the findings throughout the event and be able to accommodate the needs of the audience. Then the second one was the event needs to be accessible for the whole UK, physical and online. So the hybrid event element would come in place. We have to reach the audience at a bigger scale because some people might not be in the UK, but have families they've lost the loved ones that were in the UK, and also they cannot get out still. Many other factors that come into play. Then the event needs to focus on providing appropriate support and guidance to individuals and families and communities that have experienced loss and bereavement due to COVID-19. And then lastly, the event revolves around creating creative ideas for new rituals or actions that demonstrate inclusion in a group, and the guests can take away the end. So the legacy of the event could be the puzzle piece sculpture, as well as the charity. So it's an ongoing thing. Could I just get in the last slide now? Thank you. And then, so how can the event be rolled out to locations around the country? So the campaigns 2 days prior to the main event, it was always, I proposed it always to be intended throughout the whole UK, to do it as locally. And then the main event can be done virtually, like I just mentioned before, but also it could be, we could escalate it like down and do it locally in parks, churches. So this whole event could be done just in your local park. And however, something that I also thought could be a potential idea to start already, when just looking at everything now, would be a website with the following tabs, as you can see in the screen. So the tabs have the same themes, idea, and concept as the ones I proposed in my event assessment. So with the Eternal Book of Memories. So the guests are invited to write or draw about favorite memories of the departed loved ones, or just feelings during COVID-19. How are you feeling? So steps into the grieving journey and how to manage what you're feeling sessions. And then we would also have Together as One. I did want to reinforce this point. It was the main aim is to create these multicultural wellness talks and activities to then create this cohesion and community sense of the whole UK come together for this greater thing. And then take a moment. So in the event, it would have been like quiet rooms where, for example, here in the website, it could be as headspace podcast, music playlists, live sessions, like meditation, mindfulness, or just a room with silence to take a moment from all the other activities and process everything. And also I looked at elements like 1 minute of silence could be held nationwide in a chosen day at a chosen time to commemorate every year, or like key buildings around the nation with like structures that could turn on a certain color like white as a symbol of peace or respect during that day or week. And those are the things that I considered. That was a brief overview of my idea, and thank you for listening and giving me the opportunity to present it as well. Thank you.
Olivia, it's over to you.
Okay, next slide, please. So I'm Olivia. I've done 2 years of the events management course and I'm currently on placement. I'm going to try and describe my idea by breaking it down into 3 separate parts. So the first being how I interpreted the brief, the second, why I think it's a strong event idea, and the third, the main focal points of the event for me. So when I was looking at the brief, I tried to interpret it by breaking it down into simpler words. So the first thing that was really obvious to me was the word COVID. It was explicitly stated in the brief, and I knew that had to be a large part of what the event was about. The second word was community. It was also very apparent that this event was for the community and had to be completely orientated around the community, whatever that might be, and I'll get to how I kind of formed the word community later on. And the third word was conversation. So linking both COVID and communities together brought the word conversation. That's really what I wanted the event to be about. So from these 3 words, I tried to make those focal points into an actual concept. So then I kind of started to think about it literally. So the word COVID, what is a literal sort of translation of that word? And then the first thing I thought of was hospitals. Obviously hospitals have played a huge part during the pandemic. So I knew that I wanted hospitals to somehow be featured in the event. The second word, community. So I was kind of really struggling to interpret how community could be translated so that everyone could understand what that meant, because obviously people identify in different communities, and community doesn't mean the same thing for everyone. So again, I took that in a literal sense, and I thought the streets, I wanted the event to take place on the streets where you live. That is you are part of that community. And then the third word, conversation, I was really struggling to actually interpret that word as well into a physical sense. How do you make an event but the focal point be conversation? So then I think the Britishness inside me came out, and I thought a cup of tea So I knew that I wanted to focus on hospitals, the event being on the streets, and somehow incorporating a cup of tea. So from those different elements, I started to think about how can this actually form into a proper event idea. And I was very aware that whatever I created, it wasn't necessarily going to be suitable for everyone. So I was very conscious of things like prayer times. I knew there wasn't ever going to be a time of day or a day during the week that was suitable for everyone. So from that, I realised that the actual event had to take place over a long period of time on numerous days and in different locations. And then I started to think about people who might be deaf or blind and how they would interpret and still feel part of the community. So then from that, I thought sound and visuals need to be equally as elaborate so that no one's sort of missing out on either. So then I will explain in a second the actual entire event idea. But then I started to break it down into 3 different parts, so that they were all slightly different, but different people could at least sort of align with one of the parts of the idea. So the first bit was recognising the reason for the event. So this is the actual teacup being on the float. People will see it passing by. So the first one was recognition. The second one was mourning. So a minute's silence, that's quite generally recognised as a way of mourning. And then the third one, celebration. So that's the after event with the tea stalls and the music. So that's kind of how I formed the idea. And then this is the actual idea. So there'll be a giant teacup with a digital outer shell. And this giant teacup will start its journey on a big float at a hospital within each city. So the event will take place within each major city in the UK. The hospital being the starting point, obviously, because of the huge part they played in the pandemic. And then the teacup being on the float, that will travel around the streets of the city. And the streets will be lined with different flags from around the world, bringing in that cultural inclusivity and showing that so many people outside of the UK also experience this. Locals will then be encouraged to come out with teaspoons, keeping in line with the teacup, and chime their teaspoons as the float passes by. And then the float will arrive at a monumental location within each city. So at that point, a giant teapot will be poured into the teacup, and pictures and messages that locals have written to show their experience of the pandemic will appear on the digital outer shell of the teacup. And during that time, a 1 minute silence will take place, obviously as part of the mourning, which is quite generally recognised. And then it moves on to the after event celebration. So that will be where different types of music are played. That's giving the musicians a chance who have also been deprived of what they love to do during the pandemic. So there'll be different music displays, and then obviously then it'll go to the celebration of the tea stalls. So there'll be lots of different cultural teas, and I'll get to in a second how I kind of worked out the different cultural teas and how it could be appropriate for everyone. So just the next slide, please. So moving on now to why I think it's a strong event idea. The first part really being that it's replicable. So this event's concept can take place anywhere really. So as I said, I anticipated it to take place in each major city, but I also think it can take place on a smaller scale. So whether that's a village, and it might have more of a community feel. So rather than a digital teacup, instead it could be a school getting involved and doing a drawing. So I think it's quite adaptable and dynamic, the core event idea. And the other thing I considered when I was thinking about this event is, can it be done virtually? Because, you know, not everyone will want to attend the event in person. People are still quite wary. So I wanted to make sure it was inclusive for everyone. So the first thing I considered when I was actually creating the event was to make sure that people could still watch it virtually. So there would be a broadcasting system circulating the event. But if we was to do it completely virtually, similar to how TV productions have taken place, so in a enclosed location, and instead of the building, so you wouldn't start at a hospital, instead there might be a group of nurses and doctors, and then we'd move round to people rather than buildings if it was to be done all online. So it can be diverse in that sense. The same sort of core elements can still be implemented, but just in a slightly different manner. And also with that, there is the potential to be more inclusive. So we could send out packages and it could have Braille on the packages, different tea making equipment so that people can still experience the different cultural teas that they might not usually experience. So there's lots of ways to adapt it to make it both viable as a physical event or as a virtual event. And then the other thing is it provides a separate positive for each city. So it'll draw attention to the city, to the key locations within the city. And obviously that would also impact the economy in a good light, hopefully. And then the last point, just the next slide, please. So why I think this is the focal point of the event. This is really the point where conversation takes place and people start to perhaps relax a little bit and actually do the mingling that they haven't been able to do during the pandemic. So all elements of the actual event have been considered carefully. There is a reason. So for example, the marketing that you can see in front of the tea menu, the reason that is blue is because of the NHS, and I wanted to make sure that that was incorporated throughout. And I also wanted to include a form of ritual. So just before the celebration takes place, the 1 minute silence. Generally, everyone recognises that silence is a form of mourning and a ritual. And I wanted to make sure that that was a very obvious and clear part of this event. But the end bit with the teas, I did lots of research into this, and this was part of my cultural risk assessment. I wanted to make sure that there was something that everyone could take part in, and I actually didn't realise how big teas were in different countries. I was quite oblivious to it. So I did lots of research and the different dietary requirements of different religions and cultural groups. And then I tried to create something that was inclusive to everyone and also quite generally acceptable. There's no alcohol, it's just teas, and it's about talking, coming together, enjoying the music and trying to move on, but still recognising what's happened. And that's kind of the summary of the 3 different points and how I got to the event idea.
That's our references. Ian, do you want to move on to the next slide? Yeah, so I think something that Jenny said earlier today was that maybe it could be part like a discussion now. So we're open to questions, and thank you to Olivia and Beatrice, really fantastic presentations there, and some really very creative ideas about how to get people to come together in a way to remember, and to remember in sad things, but also to remember kind of things that bring us together. So thank you.
Can I raise 1 or 2 questions? Well, first of all, let me thank both of you, Olivia and Beatrice, for some very interesting ideas and for all the work that's gone into that. I'd be interested to ask each of you separately whose initiative you would envisage this being. You know, is this something the government would do? Is it something the local council would take the lead on? Might it be the Church of England or somebody else? Who do you see, each of you separately? I'd be interested to know who you see taking the lead in making a reality of the ideas that you've worked up. Beatrice?
Yeah, I think it would be nice maybe to scale it down to a local. So maybe the local councils could take the initiative, but always partner it up maybe with the government, because it is a nationwide thing to like also consider, and also maybe their opinion as well. But maybe it would be nicer also to just keep it local. So like, because communities then can even get to know each other more. It would be nice, maybe, in my opinion. Olivia, to you.
Okay, thank you. And Olivia, what's your thinking on that?
So my initial thought is council.
Right.
I think each individual council knows their area obviously better than anyone else does and what would work the best for them. But I think generally it needs to be a government managed thing, but with councils very closely involved.
So the government might sort of set the day or something and then leave it to local councils to put together a local
some sort of involvement. I'm not sure about the day, but just so that they're actually making sure that it goes how it's supposed to go, and councils don't get too sort of carried away with creating a completely separate concept.
Right. And can I also ask, perhaps starting with you, Olivia, what do you think will be hardest about making your event happen?
I think the most difficult thing really would be for my actual event logistically, only because I think depending on the actual time frame, I think there's still a lot of people who are very wary of what we're still going through, and making that an event that people want to attend and feel comfortable and safe attending on such a large scale on the streets. It's not in a confined area. I think that's the biggest struggle. How would you actually manage that, ensuring people are safe and ensuring that it goes smooth like any event should, but especially in a time where COVID is still prevalent?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think what you were suggesting about everybody having a kind of tea that they can enjoy is a very interesting idea. And Beatrice, what do you think will be hardest in what you were proposing?
I do agree with Olivia as well. It's probably the logistics of making the event in a large scale. I think is hard, and also it could be seen as disrespectful with everything that's still an ongoing thing. For that, an alternative like making it hybrid, making it online, it also opens a bigger spectrum for every person to attend. It could also, for example, even be held at these main centers like the churches and everything like that, online, broadcasted there, if people wanted to be that not everyone feels the same, not everyone is yet. And obviously it's still an ongoing thing. So yeah, it's making it all come at the same time, maybe do a smaller scale events, little events like Olivia just mentioned.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments or questions? We didn't introduce at the beginning, did we? We've got Jenny Hadcraft here from FaithAction, as well as Daniel Singleton and David Solis, and Amy Dolly from my office is on the line as well. And I thought I saw Daniel putting a hand up a minute ago. So Daniel.
Yeah, or I should be using the reactions. I've lost my buttons. That was really interesting, and it does take me back to just before lockdown, when we were actually contacted by someone who was actually thinking ahead for this. It was a bit grim, actually, that before there'd really been any deaths, that people were contacting us about this, and so it lived out in that way. I think these ideas are excellent, and I liked the kind of the website thing coming together that Beatrice put together there. I love the cup of tea thing. Olivia, what I'm thinking about, and maybe you pick this up in this wonderful cultural risk assessment you've mentioned, is that one of the problems we have is that there are some people who drink and some people don't drink, but tea kind of floats in between. Although I would suggest that maybe you need to check out rooibos. I've offered rooibos to people, and sometimes that's a kind of symbolic of the drink of white occupiers as opposed to other things, but there you go. I quite like it. I think I wanted to give you a couple of challenges. Is that all right? Can I do that? I know it's a great piece. So firstly, I think the tea was a good idea, and I just thought you were going to break out into tea parties. And I think that because I just wonder if this is an opportunity to commemorate the sad things that have happened, but potentially also the good things. And there certainly was that sense of cohesion there. And I think to be able to build on the clap, as it were, happening in our streets, I think would be a good thing. And that's why suddenly I thought you were going to have people running around with tea pots up and down their street, which I think could be a great point there. I kind of want to take the attention away from hospitals. I particularly have a pet hate of our British need to have a secular religion being the temples of the NHS. So I kind of feel faith should be where faith is. And I also, Olivia, I wanted to challenge one of your statements. You said councils know their localities best. I would like to challenge that. I would think there are community organisations that know what's going on. so that was kind of part of the challenge there. But I thought it was very interesting, and I think, but I also wonder if there can be that keeping up on the Thanksgiving side of things, being thankful for people's lives, but potentially even using any. I'm very focused on how can we bring people together and have opportunities, an excuse to connect. And I actually did a hot chocolate on my front drive for our street, summer 2020, celebrate the NHS, and that was quite interesting. Just the people gathering around and coming and sharing cake and sharing hot chocolate, and I think any opportunities like that I think are really great. So yeah, those are my gut reactions. To be honest with you, there was so much in your presentations. I would need to have another innings to get to grips with it. But I think there were some really great things. But yeah, let me chuck at you that whole thing. Let's maybe a little bit more prominence for Faith, I would say.
No, it's gone.
Just the statement about the councils. Yeah, I agree that there's probably organisations that know the local area better, but I was talking in relation to the government and the council. I was hoping that the council should know better than the general government.
And that's why they need to sign a faith covenant, Olivia, but that's for another time.
And what about the idea of tea parties, Olivia?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that was just my initial concept, but I think with every concept and idea, it can always be developed once different minds come together and start to think about it. And I think that's potentially, I don't know, there is a word, I just can't think of it right now, sort of, there is a main event, so perhaps what I discussed, and then there's a time for sort of little events off that bigger event, and that's the time for tea parties and smaller communities, because I do think during the pandemic, some not strange, but things that would never happen usually happen. So in my street, every single person on the street came out and we all sat around and chatted, and that has never happened before and probably would never have happened. So these sort of, not, I don't have the right word, but not strange, but irregular things start to happen. I think that's a good way of incorporating it, making it a smaller tea party.
Thank you. Beatrice, any response to Daniel's points?
No, yeah, I thought it was really good to be to also think, and I do agree with Olivia, if this was our ideas, but they do need to be polished in that way, that they need to be talked more, and when you want to do it on a bigger scale, it's harder. We discussed as well, Ruth had the idea from mind, for example, the puzzle pieces could be like the locks in, you know, in somewhere like people put it, could also be like that in local, so it could be scaled down.
Stephen, just one point particularly for this. I felt what you were talking about, which I really like, was this sense of that it may have been bad, but there was common experience. I felt that really came out of your, and we often talk about the Dunkirk or the Blitz spirit and that kind of thing. And I felt that was really oozing right the way through what you said. And I think that's another great thing to see how we can pick up. And so, yeah, I appreciated that.
Not wanting to cut across Ruth, because I know she wanted to speak, but I just wanted to add on to what you were saying, Daniel, that COVID, there's a saying that there's a blessing in every lesson, and the blessing that we've got, which sounds awful out of COVID-19, is it's a watershed moment that every person in the UK experienced this together, regardless of your creed, your culture, your religion, your ethnicity, your defining characteristics. We all experienced it together, and I think it's a good moment, as you were saying, to capitalize and continue to build on this inclusive culture that happened because of something that was so awful to all of us. And I think with these events, it really is about bringing people together. I will add cocoa tea to the teas, whether it's from Africa or the Caribbean, and bush tea as well, which is something that can be included. So I think thinking about that watershed moment for the UK and promoting that and saying this is a time where we all felt the same thing at exactly the same time, and we need to remember that really, really clearly. So yeah, sorry Ruth, I'm not used to cutting you off, but
bush tea sounds a good addition. Yeah. Now, I've got Jeremy's got his hand up, but then Ruth, you wanted to come back as well, did you? So just take Jeremy first, and then.
Thanks, Stephen, and thank you both for your presentations. Really, really interesting, as others have said. Really enjoyed listening to it. I work for FaithAction, by the way, with Daniel. Just to introduce myself, I had just two simple questions, really, which I'd be interested to kind of hear your reflections on. The first was around, and I may have missed this, so apologies if you covered this in your presentations, but did you have any ideas about when these events would happen? If thinking across the calendar year, obviously we know that the calendar is, you know, in terms of the rhythm of faith events and festivals and those kinds of things. Had you considered that in terms of where it would fall? Would this be a summer thing? Would it be a winter thing? And how would you sort of fit it within the rhythm of the other kind of commemorations and festivals that occur? So that was the first one. And the second one was about really comms and marketing. I think both of these events really thrive on public participation and investment and interest. And I wondered whether you'd given any thought to how would the word get out about this, you know, so that everybody knows that it's happening, everybody wants to be involved. Would this be something organic, as we saw with the Clap for Carers that kind of just emerged and then the media got hold of it? Or would there be a kind of a comms strategy, and how would that work? Would it be a central thing through government? Would it be more of a local thing? Have you kind of seen how that side of things might work as well for your two events, just to get everybody on board and involved and aware?
Beatrice.
Yeah, we did look a lot in the cultural risk assessment about the date, because it is quite hard when you're looking at so many religions and cultures and faiths. All the main festivities every week that Sunday it means a lot for in some religions, and then the Friday. So how could you do it? For that, I proposed maybe it would be during the week. So maybe the local communities, the centers, the churches, the masses, the mosques, they could take the initiative to spread in the days they believe is appropriate within that week timeline. And then around the month, we did discuss this. It is maybe as other commemorative events, maybe best suited in the same month as March, because that when everything started at the same time, that is very sensitive area to choose a particular month. So probably needs more discussion, but maybe in a week, extending it into a week and have a lot of events throughout the whole week to give a chance and accessibility for everyone. And in terms of the marketing, it would ideally be organic, but it would probably need help with all the partnerships to be broadcasted to a bigger audience, so everyone can actually listen. But going back to lowering the scale and scaling it down, maybe the local communities could take the initiative for them to promote it in their own way. So the website could give them steps, and then they could promote it their own way. They could take it their own way and do it that way. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe Olivia wants to.
So for my event, I think springtime is the best time of year for it to take place. It's the start of new beginnings, and I think I really wanted that to come across in the event. There is a recognition of what's happened and there is a mourning period, but I think in order to make it appropriate, there has to be a time to recognise what's happened, but also think about how do we move forward as a collective. And even though it is ongoing, that's why I didn't actually want a complete start or finish to the event. Why I wanted it to take place in each city is because the experiences and impact of COVID is ongoing, so I wanted the event to be ongoing. But I think the time of year, spring, is a good time to put that in place, because it's the start of new life and new beginnings. And then I think for mine, it definitely wouldn't be organic, that it'd have to be a marketing strategy, because it's an event that people would need to attend on a specific date within each city. So I think there'd have to be some sort of strategy to get that across to everyone.
Thank you. Ruth.
Thank you. You were asking about kind of what's the hardest thing, and when you were talking about that, I was thinking funding, because to a certain extent there are some things that need to be funded, and I know that local authorities have no money, and I appreciate how much how much has been spent on the pandemic generally. But I also know that certainly so many people, for example, in the events industry, had literally no work and maybe weren't even furloughed. So, you know, you're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. But funding the event is really important. And when we wrote the brief for the assessment, we said, think of £250,000. It was kind of a figure plucked out of the air. But if you're going to have a virtual event as well as, or you're going to live stream an actual event, that's going to take funding. I think another issue that challenges people is that whatever you do, it's going to be problematic. And so what we thought was, if you crowdsource the ideas, if you crowdsource what can we do to make up for it, that the people who are very angry about the losses that they've had, you know, that the complexities of bereavements and the feelings that people have need to be addressed. And I think this is like, it's a recognition by everybody that yes, we have all gone through it, and that maybe there is a point where we have a one-off event, but then it's ongoing. So in a way that's perhaps different from Remembrance Sunday, where you have groups of people coming together, communities coming together to remember the people who've died in wars or fighting. It's kind of different from that, but it's a similar model. It's something that happens in every community. And I think that's a kind of a powerful model to use. And I also think back to the Manchester One Love event, and there were two events. One was the concert, the Ariana Grande concert, which was actually run by our graduates. But there was also a civic event that brought together people in public, in a big square in Manchester. There were people represented from different faith communities, but also there was a poet. There was so much there that it just kind of emerged. And so it feels as if it needs like a trigger to start something off, to have an idea, to have a national discussion and debate about how can we commemorate the losses and also think about the legacy of the changes, you know, the people who are living with different lives now. And I think definitely the logistics is another issue. Yeah, so I think local communities are the key part of it, but it might need a bit of a push from national government funding. But I know that if you think about Remembrance Day, that happens, you know, it is televised. It should be similar, but it shouldn't just be one day. It should be something that we can participate in at the time, but also ongoing.
Thank you. And I guess your figure of £250,000, that would be for a locality to do it, would it? And if you wanted to do every locality, it would be. It
was just a plucked out of the figure that I just kind of made up. So it's not based on anything. But I think if it, you know, my church is in Bingley, near Bradford. I live in Bradford. On Remembrance Day, I participated in a parade, in a procession, in a service that there were hundreds of people at, and that's very, very meaningful to that community. But it's kind of, this is bigger than that in a way. Sadly, it's bigger than that, and I think we are making a mistake if we choose not to do anything. But what we do choose to do is going to be hard, because lots of people are upset. I mean, really upset. They're grieving, and it's complex.
One thing which has attracted a bit of attention is the wall opposite Parliament, alongside St Thomas's Hospital, where people have put up a heart to represent somebody that they've lost. And it's interesting how that's attracted a lot of people go there.
Yeah.
And for quite a lot of people who've been bereaved, I think that particular thing means quite a lot.
I think one of the things that we wanted to do was to not make it London centric.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you're from up north originally.
True.
And so, you know, we exist in the rest of the UK, and that's why
even if you haven't got any railway lines.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in Bradford we definitely don't.
No.
But you know, we exist in local communities. If I walk out of the back of my house, I will meet people that I know, and I'll meet people that I don't know, but I'll talk to them. And that is different from how it was before the pandemic. That didn't happen in the same way. I have new friends. And so as I think Ian would probably want to say, you know, there are positives in this as well.
Yeah.
But it feels like there is some need for a recognition of what's happened.
Yeah, I think that's a strong point.
Stephen, sorry.
David's got a point. Sorry, let me bring in David. We've got about 5 minutes, so we'll then need to wrap up. But David, what was your point?
Thank you, Stephen. Firstly, girls, well done, brilliant presentation. First question is a flippant one, but very important. Has Ruth given you very high scores for this work? Because if not, I will ask Stephen to raise that as a question in the House. But the other serious question is, should this be a young people-led piece of work? Because I think young people's voices have been lost in the last 2 years, mostly around the debate and the COVID work. But I'm just interested, obviously I'm young, so I can be in this conversation. What are you laughing at? But I'm interested in your position because you're students. Can we get everyone involved in this, or should it be led by young people?
Well, let's get some young people to respond to that point. Olivia, what do you think?
I think really it should be a collaboration of all types of people, not just a specific age group. I definitely think that including people of a broad age range is important, because people interpret what's happened in a different way because they've experienced it at different stages in their life. But yeah, I agree that I think actually bringing that in is quite interesting, whether it should be young people led or not. But I think my initial reaction is everyone should, all different age ranges should try to be involved in the planning and the implementation of it, because it brings those different perspectives, because people at different ages have experienced COVID in a slightly different way because of where they're at in life.
Thank you. And let's see what Beatrice thinks about this. Beatrice, can I just ask you another question? I don't know, I probably should be able to work this out, but which country you come from originally. But what I wondered was, if you were doing this exercise there, would your proposals, do you think, be the same, or would they be different?
Oh, I'm from Spain,
right,
from the south, and yes, probably would be different because every nation has different cultures and within. So every I believe every nation is multicultural, but it is also tailored and different. So I think probably if I would have done this project in Spain, the culture would have been the same, but maybe I would have had to tailor it around it, because nations are different and they do diversify. And in terms also of the young people, I do agree with Olivia, because COVID has affected everyone. I don't think it would be fair for young people to just lead it. I think everyone should have a voice, everyone should have a say in this, and it's highlighting that cohesion and including, so the inclusivity and the diversity that we have in this nation, to all, let's sit down and let's talk about it with a cup of tea, like Olivia said. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Bernadette, did you want to chip in our final minute or whatever it is?
Yeah, it was just the last idea you spoke about the wall, and I think Beatrice's idea of this memorial of the hands, and maybe a cup of tea and a teapot, whatever, where people can actually go collectively at any point in their community, and if, as the pandemic is ongoing, they can add to the sculpture, or they can combine their feelings, whether it's a reflective pool with the hands, somewhere that communities can go to or see physically, because that's part of the ritual, that there is somewhere to go where you can reflect regardless. And I think that's really, really important as well, that the activity that takes place, the ritual, the tea or whatever it is important, but that central location where the memorial sits, just like the cenotaph is really important as well, because I think it will hold meaning moving forward. And if we do need to commemorate consistently in the future, there's a place that people can go and there's a place that we can do that. So I think that's really important.
You think there should be a wall a bit like the one opposite Parliament, but perhaps everywhere. Every community should have one of those.
Yes, yeah, or some sort of something symbolic where people can go, whether it is those hands, because I think this idea of reaching out to one another, again, is this whole watershed moment where we're collectively one and we can all reach out to each other, or a wall where you can pin a heart or something like that. I think that is really, really important.
Well, that's been extremely interesting. Thank you very much, all of you staff at Leeds Becket University, particularly students, to Olivia and Beatrice for the very interesting ideas you've come up with and the very interesting discussion that you've prompted as well. And I'm sure we are going to all have to think about these things, and the fact you've got us to think about it in this way is really helpful. And I hope that our all-party group can perhaps contribute when the time comes to the deliberations nationally about this. Thank you, and that concludes our hour. We'll be putting this on our website so other people can see it, and hopefully will prompt some quite widespread discussion and reflection on this, and let's see where we all end up. Thank you all very much indeed.